You're listening to Parasearch Radio, news, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. Parasearch UK Radio. Parasearch Radio, broadcasting to the UK and beyond.
The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch Radio or its affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Haunted Histories with your host Penny G. Morgan, right here on Parasearch Radio.
Well, a very good evening to you all, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of Haunted Histories with me, your host, Penny G. Morgan, here only on Parasearch Radio. Those eagle-eyed amongst you probably noticed that this show was due to go out on the 20th of September, but after the cowardly attacks on the London's tube system a few days beforehand, we decided to postpone it for a week, as the focus of this week's show is on the deserted Aldwych Station, tube station. And we're going to talk about an investigation that our friends, Ghostly Goings-On, did there a few years ago. When we talk to Danni, you will hear about their experiences and also the fact that any investigation should always be done legally, as the risk of sort of going in as an explorer just really isn't worth it. And by risk, I don't just mean the trespassing and the risk of being arrested, but some of these places carry a very high level of health and safety risks which are not to be played with. We stressed this last week when we looked at Pavelia, and it's something I will keep reiterating. Stay safe out there. So, the London Underground. Well, I know a few people who work on the system, and when they start telling you some of the facts surrounding this, I think, quite amazing feat of engineering, it's no wonder that so many stories and myths are synonymous with its construction and operation. For example, how many miles, this is miles, of lines do you think there are? Anyone want to guess? Yes? No? Really? Well, it's actually 249, yes, 249 miles of lines and tunnels. That's actually further in miles than driving from London to Hull. The mileage aside, there are something in the region of 49 ghost stations. So those are disused stations which haven't actually been demolished. And there's quite a few of the latter as well, stations that have been demolished. So there's an awful lot going on down there that your average commuter would never get to see. The Tube, and does anyone know why it's called the Tube? Would you like to know? Yes? Well, I'm going to tell you anyway, even if you've said no. It became known as that after the twopence fare on the Central Line in the early 20th century. Called it the Twopenny Tube. Well, it was first constructed in 1863 with the Metropolitan Line. That's the oldest of the lines, and that operated using gas-lit wooden carriages hauled by steam engines. It worked alongside the District Line to form the Circle Line in 1884. Now, one of the things you do need to remember, aside from the fact that I've given you two potential pub quiz answers to that, why was it known as the Tube, and which was the oldest line, I'm going to test you on these later. It was actually run by, London Underground was actually run by lots of different private companies until the 1930s, which is actually why all the lines have different names. Did you ever wonder that? Because you go to maybe one of the tubes in another country, or underground type facilities like the Metro, in Le Métro in Paris, and the lines don't have names like we do. Well, that's why. It's because different companies set them up and so name them after their companies. Another iconic thing about the London Tube, probably the Underground map, wouldn't you say? It's a bit different. Well, this was designed by a gentleman named Harry Beck to resemble an actual electric circuit, and it's actually been like that since 1931. There you go. Like I said, pub quiz. You go on a television show, and you win money because of the stuff I'm teaching you. I want a cut. I think that's fair. So now you know when the tube was built or started being constructed, you know how many miles of tunnels there are, the oldest line, etc., etc. Well, shall we look at some of the history surrounding it? World War One. World War One. Most people forget, or didn't even know, that there were actually air raids during World War One. Places near the coast, and actually also slightly further inland, like my hometown, Chelmsford, Gravesend, where actually, ironically, I was at the weekend at a fort, 1940s Open Day, and very good it was too. Norfolk, again, somewhere I live. I'm spotting a pattern here. They seem to have attacked where I lived. Anyway, joking aside, they were all targeted in what was known as the Zeppelin raids. On the night of the 31st of May 1915, a single German Zeppelin airship appeared over North London and began dropping its deadly cargo on the darkened streets below. And this was the first time that the capital had been bombed from the air. The first bomb was actually dropped on Stoke Newington, and after Stoke Newington, bombs were dropped on Dalston, Hoxton, Shoreditch, Spitalfields, Whitechapel and Stepney, followed by one on Stratford and finally Leytonstone. The biggest of the 41 fires reported that night occurred in Hoxton, where at least 2 cabinet makers' premises were absolutely gutted. Most damage occurred to private dwellings, but bombs also struck the Shoreditch Empire Music Hall during a performance and smashed through the glass roof of the Great Eastern Railway's Bishopsgate goods yard. In Whitechapel, bombs struck and damaged a church, a synagogue, and a bonded warehouse full of Johnny Walker's whiskey. That would have gone up, wouldn't it? It was actually during this time that the tube stations were actually first used as air raid shelters, although their use as such didn't become more infamous and perhaps prevalent until the Second World War. But let's look at some of the stations, shall we? Well, Aldgate, on the Circle line between Tower Hill and Liverpool Street. And one of the most recent tragic events there was in 2005, when suicide bombers triggered their explosives left on a train as it left Liverpool Street, killing 7 people and injuring many others. But it's actually not the only dark part to Aldgate's history. It was also very close to the murder site of Catherine Eddowes, one of Jack the Ripper's victims in September 1888, and it's not surprisingly the starting point for many of the popular Jack the Ripper walks. Perhaps the most gruesome fact, though, is that Aldgate is actually built over the site of one of the biggest plague pits in London, as next door to the station stands St Botolph's, where over 1,000 plague victims were buried in the graveyard over a space of just 2 weeks in September in 1665. Bank Station is probably one that every visitor to London has used, with its connection to Monument, and also the fact that the DLR, the Docklands Light Railway from Canary Wharf, comes into there for those looking to change to Liverpool Street or the very busy Central Line. During the Blitz, Bank received a direct hit by a bomb in January 1941, which actually resulted in the death of 56 people after it penetrated the road surface and exploded in the escalator machine room. However, the reputed ghost of Bank, the Bank Nun as she is known, or Sarah Whitehead as she's believed to be, was in actual fact the sister of a man who worked at the Bank of England, and he was charged with forgery back in 1811. Keep in mind that back then forgery was non-pardonable, and it also carried the death sentence, which was normally carried out at Newgate Prison. Well, Sarah had been sheltered from her brother's trial and also his ultimate death sentence, and when she found out, she is meant to have gone to the Bank of England in search of him. Well, she's believed to have had some kind of nervous breakdown, and for a long time after that would take to visiting the bank dressed in a long black dress and black crepe veil, asking for her brother. Whether Sarah really had some kind of mental break, it does come into question when you find out that she did accept a reasonable sum of money from the bank in order to stop her coming in. But it didn't stop her, she just used to loiter around outside. But she's meant to be a ghost that's seen and heard at Bank. Bethnal Green. Now, this one is a horribly, horribly tragic story. A truly tragic story, which also has the conspiracy theorists in a bit of a tiz due to the facts of it. It was the scene of the largest civilian disaster of the whole Second World War, when 173 people were killed, and that included a large number of children, whilst attempting to enter the station after hearing the air raid sirens start wailing on the 3rd of March 1943 at 8:17 p.m. The East End of London had experienced incredibly heavy bombing, so it's not surprising really that there was a rush for safety. I'm not going to go into too much detail as to what exactly happened or paint the picture for you, as I do find it quite upsetting. And if you want to read up on it, feel free to do so. But questions have always surrounded the circumstances, and it was never reported at the time due to government censorship. It wasn't until 1946 that an accident incident report became available, which actually blamed the panic of the residents, so it was their own fault in other words, coupled with poor lighting, a narrow entrance to the shelter and a lack of supervision by the ARP wardens. However, the real crunch comes when you read that no German planes were seen that night and no bombs were actually dropped. The explosions, which witnesses say they heard to account for the sirens having gone off, were actually rockets being fired at Victoria Park, which is about a quarter of a mile away, by an experimental new weapon. So who knows why the sirens were set off? All we do know is that many lives were lost and many more changed irrevocably because of all the secrecy. Like I say, I'm not going to go into detail what happened on those steps, but 170 odd people died from being crushed, basically, and some poor person had to move those bodies subsequently. It's horrible, horrible. But some of those people have been down in Bethnal Green and said they've heard screams, they've heard scuffling noises. I don't know if it's something I'd want to look into myself, but anyway. But shall we examine a few more? Farringdon. Now this is an interesting one. Oh yes it is. Over in the old meatpackers area near Smithfields. Well, Smithfields itself has an interesting and, shall we say, slightly morbid history. Not only was it the home to both tournaments and duels, it was also the site of executions for over 400 years, and was where William Wallace, yes, Mel Gibson of Braveheart fame, or the character he played in Braveheart fame anyway, was executed in 1305. It's also the site of yet another plague pit. But it is where the story of 13-year-old Annie Naylor abounds. And this one again, it's quite a sad story, so if you're easily upset, probably not one to listen to. But Annie was an apprentice milliner to a lady by the name of Sarah Metyard. Well, Metyard had about 5 young girls in her employ, all of which she had procured from the parish workhouses, which, to be honest, wasn't uncommon in the 1700s. These workhouses that were funded by the parish used to encourage people to come and sort of home the young people who were living there to teach them a trade. Well, Anne was a sickly child, and she struggled to keep up with the work. The Metyards, the family, the mother and daughter, I believe, punished her, and she ran away. But she was found very, very quickly and brought back. She was banned from eating when they found out she'd run away. Well, she found the strength and she ran away again, but sadly the person she asked for help and who she turned to returned her to her hell. The Metyards beat her and confined her to a room with no food or water again for 3 days, but this time they tied her hands behind her and fastened them to the door. By the 4th day, beaten, starving, dehydrated and whatsoever, she had died. Both mother and daughter Metyard were eventually arrested, and they were also tried for the death of Anne's poor 8-year-old sister Mary. The Metyards' claim of the children being in ill health anyway fell on deaf ears, and they were sentenced to be executed at Tyburn. But poor Anne is meant to have never even found peace, even in death, and is reported to haunt Farringdon, where she is known as the Screaming Spectre. Those poor children. The last one I'm going to mention before we chat with Danni from Ghostly Goings On is Liverpool Street. Most of us have heard of Liverpool Street, and this is a station I should think most people have either been through or to at some point on trips to London. Well, did you know it stands on the site of the first ever Bethlehem Hospital, or Bedlam Hospital is sometimes known, the one that was built from 1247? Did you know that? Well, from Liverpool Street it moved to a site at Moorfields and then one at St George's Field, which is actually now the Imperial War Museum. So the third incarnation of the Bedlam Mental Asylum is actually now the Imperial War Museum. Anyway, the ghost of a former Bedlam patient, which could be queried because of the time period she's meant to come from, and that Bedlam had actually moved to Moorfields by then, is meant to haunt Liverpool Street. But what there is, and what they could do, be a bit more inventive at looking at, is there's no question about the burial sites which have been recovered during various excavations there. One of these supposedly was a chap by the name, and this name is brilliant, Ludovic. I presume it's meant to be a version of Ludovic, but it's spelled Lodovic Muggleton, who founded his own religious sect which argued that the devil had become incarnate in Eve. Now, is it one of these people who was buried there who's responsible for the screams that are supposedly heard when the platforms are dull of train noise? Who knows? Well, we're going to have a quick 30-second break before we talk to Danni of Ghostly Goings On. Don't go anywhere.
Hello, Harry Price here. Good evening. If there's nothing myself and everybody else enjoy here on the other side more is the sit back and relax and listen to Parasearch Radio with its paranormal news, views and reviews from across the UK and beyond. Make sure to find out more about them on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web, whatever they are, to keep up to date with all their broadcasts throughout the week. And I hope you enjoy them as much as we do over here. Hello? Is anybody there?
And we're back, and I'm really thrilled to be joined by another one of our friends from Ghostly Goings On, Danni. Hi Danni, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. And you?
I'm very well, thank you for asking. Thank you ever so much for joining us. We're going to be talking about Aldwych Tube Station in London shortly. But everyone who knows me knows I'm quite nosy. I like to know about people, and I like to ask. There won't be too probing questions, but how did you get into the paranormal?
Okay, so it's a subject that I've been interested in ever since I was probably about 6 years old.
Okay.
My grandparents used to own a pub just outside of Ross-on-Wye in Herefordshire, and it was quite an old pub, and it was supposedly haunted, and I used to see things all the time. There was in particular a small boy who used to just wander through the bedroom that I used to sleep in. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't the only one who saw him. There was loads of other people, like customers, even my family. So I suppose it kind of stemmed from that, from all the, happenings in that pub. And then I think there was a TV program, wasn't there, called Strange But True. Do you remember that TV show?
No, I'll be honest.
No?
No.
Okay. Well, I used to bug my mum to let me stay up and watch it, and then I used to get too scared when it was on. So, yeah, I know, can't win. But yeah, I loved watching things like that, and I suppose as I just got older and kind of gained a bit more understanding about what it was, I just got more interested in it. And yeah, as soon as I was old enough, I was attending, public events, and just got hooked. So I decided to start my own, and here I am now.
So what made you decide to start your own?
Well, I guess it's an expensive hobby, isn't it?
Yes.
So I just thought, well, I can do this. I can go on investigations every weekend. I can take my own guests to these locations. But never in a million years did I ever imagine that it would, turn out to be so, you know, so successful. 'Cause, I mean, we've been running for 5 years now,
Right.
and most of our events are sold out. So yeah, I loved, you know, the fact that these people were able to go out on the weekends and kind of do this, either as a hobby or as, you know, I don't know whether they were paid. And I just thought, I want to get me in on that.
Okay. So you were quite
So,
young
yeah.
then when you set your business up?
Yeah, I was 25, 24,
Wow.
25. And I actually gave up my full-time job as well to start it
Wow.
up. So yeah, it was a bit of a gamble, but
Boom or
one that's
bust
paid off.
almost. It had to
Yeah,
work. Wow,
yeah,
that's brave. That's
yeah.
brave. So where was your first ever investigation?
So our first investigation was at the Ancient Ram Inn, which is in
Yeah,
Gloucestershire.
yeah.
Because obviously, you know, we're based in Gloucestershire, so it's nice and local, just up the road. So yeah, the first couple of events that we did were there. And then I think it was Woodchester, and then we kind of went to the Skirrid. So we kind of kept it local, you know, to begin with. But we go all over the place now, all over the
Mm.
UK.
So where's been
Yeah.
your favourite place that you've been to?
Oh my gosh, that's a really
Or
hard
you can have
question.
three.
Oh, that makes it even harder. No, I'm just joking. Um, okay, so I would say my first would be Woodchester,
Yeah.
Woodchester Mansion. I have got a bit of a soft spot for that place. I witnessed probably some of the most incredible activity I've ever seen in that place.
Mm.
And then I would probably go with Gloucester Prison.
Right.
Gloucester Prison is also a good one. And the London Tombs as well. That was an
Ah.
interesting investigation that we did there.
Well, see,
Yeah.
Woodchester, quite a lot of people have mentioned that. Like even people who don't sort of run their own companies
Yeah.
and everything else, they've said it's just sort of,
Yeah,
um,
it's one of those places where you either get nothing or you get everything.
yeah,
But I mean, I always try to find, or I like to try and find a rational explanation for
yeah,
things that might occur. But there was one incident at Woodchester that none of us could explain, and I think there was about 12 of us that witnessed it,
mm,
and it was during a break, so we weren't even investigating, and I was outside with some guests, and there's a long corridor which leads through from the back door, and
hmm,
we all heard this like violent shaking, like a metal shaking. And we looked in the corridor, and there was a heavy-duty padlock on one of the gates, just rattling like somebody had hold of it and was just shaking
yeah.
the whole gate. Yeah, that was pretty interesting. I didn't get much sleep that night.
I'll bet.
So, yeah.
Because that, I mean, Woodchester itself has got quite an interesting, wasn't it a World War One hospital or
Ye-
something, a recovery
Um,
centre or something at some point?
no, I think the American troops used it as
Oh,
a
right,
training base.
right.
Yeah.
I knew it had some kind
But
of military
yeah,
link to it.
yeah, no, that's correct. Yeah, and I think there's supposed to have been a couple of fatalities from those training exercises.
Right, okay.
Um, yeah, at the lake. So, yes, it does have a
Yeah.
rather checkered past.
Yeah, I think a lot of these big houses in the UK that do, though, don't they? If when you start delving into them,
Oh,
the different things
definitely.
that they've been, and I mean, I know
Yeah,
there's a big hall near where my parents live that would have been the, um, like the Lord of the Manors
yeah,
property, and so not only was it a manor house, I know it was also a boys' boarding school that got shut down under sort of quite nefarious reasons. It was also the admin centre for the 8th Air Force, the Bomber Command, the American Bomber Command, and
oh
then
wow.
it was where Lotus, Team Lotus, the Formula One division, were based, and you
My
know, it's
gosh.
as, but when you start sort of looking into it, and even I remember meeting, and it was when I was younger, quite a lot younger. It was some kind of memorial thing. So it was when a lot of the vets who flew from there in World War
Yeah,
Two were still around, and they came over, and they opened up the hall so that the villagers could go in, because before then it was very secret. You couldn't go in it because Lotus were obviously very private about their designs and all of
yeah,
that. And I remember chatting to some of these folks in their 70s, you know, ex-American military, who were saying, nope, we'd never go down in the cellars. The cellars were haunted. Pictures would be moved, and nope, we'd never go in there. Oh, we'd never go in that room either, without sort of taking a crucifix in with us. And it's just like, and these are tough military lads, and you know, they've experienced stuff. And then they said that one of the villagers who'd lived in the village for like all of her life, she said, yeah, her mum used to clean there, and she wouldn't go in this particular room because things would get smashed. And you just, you know, I think everywhere's got an interesting history when you start to delve into it, but it's not all documented.
No, it's not.
So where would you love to go if you could choose 3 places anywhere in the world? Where would you love to go?
Oh my God, anywhere in the world.
Anywhere. Money is no object. Accessibility is no object.
Oh my gosh. That is a hard question.
Oh, come on, you make me sound like Jeremy Paxman now.
I know, I am trying to think. But there is actually, and do you know what? I actually don't know the name of it. I cannot remember the name, but it is an old sanatorium in America, which narrows it down a bit. Yes, that is the one. Yes, so I would love to go there.
Yeah.
So that's one. I'll tell you another place actually, and I have been, but it was we didn't really get to investigate it as such. Colditz Castle. Oh, which I can probably hear everyone going, oh, but I think it's an amazing place, and I think it would be very interesting to spend the night inside there.
See, I'm a World War II buff as well, so...
Oh, so you'd be joining me.
Yeah. I'll go in your suitcase.
Oh, and then a third. Oh my gosh. There's just too many to choose from. This is a really cool question. Anywhere that you could recommend? So I've put you on the spot now.
Yeah, all right. My top 3 to investigate. Gresson Hall Workhouse in Norfolk, because I've had experiences there during the day, and I want to see if I can find anything at night.
Yeah.
I don't mind which one, but I'd love to go to one of the old derelict asylums in the US.
Yeah.
Because we don't really have those kind of buildings in the UK anymore, because they get pulled down and everything. I'd love to go to one, and not one that's been developed into something else, that is literally just sort of almost like the Mary Celeste. It's been left as it is. And where else?
It's hard, isn't it?
It is hard, but I've got quite a few that are on my... I mean, Woodchester is on my wish list, if I could go somewhere. And I'd love to do something like... I mean, I'd like to do Waverley Hills, but I think there's some other sort of sanatoriums out in the States that haven't been done quite so much. I'd also like to do sort of things like Lizzie Borden's house and the Villisca Axe House and those kind of places, because one of my, I suppose, bugbears with the US side of investigating is the constant thing. It's demons, it's demonic, I just think it's a nasty person who has become a spirit. Where else would I like to go? Missouri State Penitentiary. That would be one.
That would be pretty awesome.
Mopen. I mean, I know the girls, 3 Girls in the Dark, and that's like on their doorstep. And so they all said, "Oh, if you ever come over, just give us a shout, and we'll take you there." And it's like, well, I've got to get to Missouri first, but you know, so somewhere like that, like somewhere that's. I think the thing is with the prisons in the US, most of them are less than 200 years old.
Yeah.
Whereas here, you know, they can be 400 or 500 years old.
Yeah, some of them are really old. They are.
Yeah. So I have got. There's quite a few, but there is definitely a theme in what I'd like to do. It's all like asylums and workhouses and things like that.
See, I think if I had to choose a third location, I would love to do perhaps maybe like one of the royal palaces over here, or like the Tower of London. That would be amazing. But
a lot of people say that one as well. I think the best answer to that question I got was from someone who told me they'd like to do Blackpool Tower.
Oh wow!
because that place has got his great aunt was an acrobat, or contortionist or something in the circus there, and he used to go there all the time to see her perform. And apparently there was a big fire there at some point, and it actually killed people. Did die in this fire, and obviously everything else that it's been in,
I have heard actually that Blackpool Tower is supposed to be quite haunted. So
I can imagine it would be, but I sort of that was kind of one I never would have thought of. As soon as he started talking about it, I thought, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it would be pretty cool.
It wouldn't it? Wouldn't it? Wouldn't it?
It would.
Yeah, it's got such a sort of massive history to it, and I'd even like to do is it the Blackpool Ballroom? They do the Strictly Come Dancing.
Yeah, yeah.
Somewhere like that, because I bet that's got residual energy pumping through it.
Well, I remember seeing, I think it was a couple of years ago now, that a group had actually managed to gain access to the pleasure beach.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and I think they run a couple of events at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. So, although I'm not quite sure what the story behind that one is, but yeah, I thought that was quite an unusual location.
It would be different, wouldn't it? But yeah, I'd love to go somewhere like, the ballroom, because the energy there would probably be quite happy energy, quite positive.
Absolutely. Yeah,
but
I would say.
I bet you, if you shut your eyes, there was people dancing around you and having a really good time. But yeah, there's so many places. It is hard. But I like putting people on the spot a little bit, but they've never turned it back on me like you just did. So kudos.
I'll take that.
But yeah, Waverley Hills. Yes, I do. Quite a few people mention Waverley. I'm hoping we'll be doing a show on that next year, and get a friend of the show's Christopher St. Booth, he's done films there, and he knows the place incredibly well.
Wow.
Yeah, he did. I think his history there was he's British, but him and his brother, twin brother, but sort of American citizens, and they were doing a film. It was like a horror film there, and there was so much stuff going on they couldn't explain. They decided to come back and do a proper investigation type documentary.
Wow.
And this was before your Ghost Adventures and Ghost Asylums and all that started visiting it. And he knows the place really well. So yeah, that would be. But I think any of those sort of ones in America, because a lot of them have just been left as they are. You've got so much artifacts in there and possessions, and it would be interesting.
Very dark history.
Yeah.
Very dark history.
Actually, another one I'd like to do is the Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles.
Oh yes, I have heard of that one.
Yeah,
it sounds like you better start saving.
I need to move to LA. I need to move to America. I'm gonna. Yeah.
By the sounds of it.
I've got a few years to save until the kids leave home, so I can't really do it until then. But I'll stick to my UK ones for now. I'll get around
start
those.
Off with Woodchester and just build up.
Yeah, I'll go from there. But talking about the UK, Aldwych. Now, this place is almost impossible to get into.
Yes.
Or to get into legally, which I want to stress that if you're ever going to do an investigation somewhere, like, anywhere that is difficult to get into, there's a reason it's difficult, and that's because to get legal permission to go in there is not easy.
No.
And somewhere like, an old tube station, even if the lines they're not active there, it's still a pretty dangerous place to be.
Yeah, absolutely. But
so how did you do it?
Wow. I at the time, I can't take the credit for this one. There was a lady who I used to work quite closely with, and she lived down London way, and she approached me and said, what about trying to get access to Aldwych? And I was like, straight away, oh my God, that would be amazing. If we could get in there, that would be fabulous. And she worked her magic, and fair play to her, she got us access to the station to do a public event. Even though we had permission and that was all fine, it literally took months to get
Yeah.
everything passed. We had to go through everything. We had to sign disclaimers. So it wasn't just a case of, phoning up TfL and saying, yeah, we fancy spending the night down in Aldwych. Yeah, that's fine. Come on down. It literally took months to get everything organised and for permission to be put in place. So it's not an easy location to gain access to. And as far as I'm aware, there was only ourselves and a couple of others who have actually been granted that access. So I feel quite privileged that we've actually been allowed to go in there and investigate it, because it isn't, investigating that place is not a regular, thing. It is quite rare. So we were very, very lucky. We were lucky.
And how many of you were there in your group when you went to investigate?
So I think it was about 30 people. I think we had 10 people per group. And we split, because it was 2 years ago that we went. We went in October 2015.
Right.
So we took 30 people, split into 3 groups of 10, and kind of covered, a different area and swapped around and things. So, but we only really had access to the ticket hall. So that's where you first walk into the station, and then we were allowed on platform 1 and platform 2.
Right.
But TfL were really strict with, we weren't allowed to have the lights off. We had to have, or at least on platform 1, we had to have the lights kept on there. So it wasn't your usual investigation.
Yeah.
But that didn't matter, because how often can you say that you've investigated a, disused London Underground station?
Yeah, definitely. There's an awful lot of places now where you can't turn the emergency lighting off, for example, so it's never necessarily... But as you say, some of these amazing venues that are sort of, in case your job and my hobby gives us a chance to do, is to go into places where A, you may not necessarily get to go into anyway, B, you certainly don't get to go into with the sort of 10 or 11 people. And so the fact that they need to keep emergency lighting on for safety reasons, it's still a pretty amazing thing to experience.
But
sorry, go on.
I was going to say, when we first got there and they said to us, because it wasn't just the emergency lighting, it was the full blown lighting. So it was like daylight in there. It was that bright. And at first we were kind of a bit put off by that, but it really didn't matter, because as you well know yourself, it doesn't have to be dark, to experience anything. And, we still had some interesting things happen, even with the lights on. So it just goes to show that it doesn't always have to be dark.
Okay. Well, it didn't actually Aldwych didn't actually close as a station until the mid-90s. So it was running for
94.
Yeah, it was running for sort of 80, 90 years as a station.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was built on the site of an old theatre as well, I believe. So there's an awful lot of reports of some of the sort of stories that have come from it, to being actors and actresses and stuff who would have trod the boards. It was used as it was an air raid shelter. As well, most of the tube stations, but it also housed a lot of valuable artefacts from the British Museum during the war as well, to protect them, which is so it's sort of got such a mixture of potential there, and that's not including any sort of day-to-day activities from tube suicides have been going on for ever since the tubes were in existence, sadly. So if we start with the ticket office. And I think it's beautiful looking, the pictures I've seen of it. It's very sort of,
it's amazing.
Turn of the last century sort of design. It doesn't seem to have been, it wasn't updated towards the end of its use. I think it's lovely.
Yeah.
How did that feel walking in there? Did you feel the sort of bustle of people, or?
It sounds really cliche, and I know it sounds really cliche, but it just felt, I know there was 30 of us there, but considering the size of it, that wasn't really that many people. But it did just feel busy. Like there was just people, how they would have been, I suppose, just kind of going around the day-to-day business, trying to get the train, get to work, or get to, wherever. It really did feel busy in there, which I know sounds ridiculous, and people are probably thinking, well, of course it was busy. It was, the main entrance of a tube station. But I don't think Aldwych was actually, it wasn't too much of a busy station, not in comparison to the others. I think that's why it shut down. But you could feel, you could feel that stood in there. Mm-hmm. You could, for sure.
Yeah. So did you? I mean, what equipment did you take in to the station to use?
Okay, so we used quite a lot of motion sensor lights and motion sensor alarms, that kind of thing. We also use, have you heard of the Echovox?
Yes, yep.
Yeah, so we've used that there. And then we obviously had, kind of like your bog standard equipment, your K2s and things. But I will say that we pretty much had to not really pay too much attention to those because there's so many wires and everything in that place. They were just constantly going off. But we had some really interesting responses through the Echovox whilst we were in the ticket hall. Mm-hmm. And I know that you touched upon the story of it being haunted by an actress.
Yes.
Who apparently wasn't very happy with the theatre being demolished, to make way for the station. Mm-hmm. But we actually had an actor as opposed to an actress, and we had the name Marcus come through on more than one occasion across a couple of the groups. And one of our guests asked him if he was from London, if he lived in London, and as clear as day, it replied with Tooting, which I believe is a area in London.
It is,
is
yeah.
it?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
I'm so glad that is. Otherwise, I would have looked a bit silly.
No, it is.
So we were quite impressed with that because we found, felt that was quite an intelligent response, and it was, I know that some people say, well, some of these answers that you get through these devices can be too generic, but I mean that was a perfect, because it was, perfect response to what we asked.
Yeah.
So we actually believe that we had an actor there rather than the actress. I don't believe that any of the other groups came across a disgruntled actress whilst we were there, but it was interesting. It was hard to conduct the investigation in the ticket hall because at around midnight, the outside on the street, they decided to start digging the road up. So we had drills and diggers going off about 12 feet away from where we were investigating. So that kind of harped it a bit. But yeah, up until that point, it was certainly interesting.
So did you have a medium or a sensitive on board?
No. See, I don't really tend to use mediums on our public events, not on the majority of them. We do occasionally, but I prefer the guests to come along, and I'm not saying that everyone is a medium, but I do believe that everyone, if they put their mind to it, is sensitive to spirit. Yeah. So I like our guests to come along and kind of be our mediums then, if I like them to get involved, and I feel that from experience the guests are more comfortable in saying what they're feeling when they haven't got a medium there who's feeding them everything, then, if you're with me.
Yeah.
So we didn't take a medium to Aldwych.
Okay. So that's the ticket office, and Marcus came through, you used the Echo Box, various other things.
Yeah.
What about platform 1? What was that like?
So platform 1, that was the platform that we had to keep the light on. Although I believe that is platform 1. It's the one with the train carriage on, isn't it? I'm pretty sure it is.
I've never been to Aldwych, so I don't know.
Yeah. No, I'm pretty sure it's platform 1.
Right.
So we, what did we have in there? We had the information of another gentleman, and we had a full name with this one. Excuse me. The name of Dean Dix,
right.
Who was apparently aged 26 and worked on constructing the platform 2.
Okay.
So we had information from him, even to the point of his wife's name. He gave his wife's name as Sarah. And when he was asked how he passed away, there was a response of, there was 3. One of our guests asked him, well, what happened to you? What do you mean there was 3? And then we had the response of, they grabbed me. And then that's when it all kind of, pardon the pun, died off. We didn't really, communicate with him any further. It was like he'd just gone. But we had a REM pod situated in the away from the track. I know the track's not live or anything. Kind of did a bit of a baseline reading before we put it down, just to make sure there was no wires and things down there to set it off. So we had a REM pod in the entrance, so you walk through the tunnel onto the platform, and that was going off. A few occasions that we were down there. And some guests also said that they felt somebody like stroking their hair.
Right.
So that happened to 2.
This will be a question about the REM pod, and I'm not disputing that it was something paranormal. Obviously, we all know there's a lot of rats and things like that down in the underground. You had the lights on. Would you have seen if a rat had come past anything like the REM or the motion sensors? You would have seen that. We would have seen it,
right. Because the REM pod was in view. With regards to the motion sensor lights, we had them no further than probably 6 feet away from us. So we would have seen if that had been a rat or anything. We didn't see any while we were down there, luckily, because we didn't see one. Although I wasn't looking. So I probably would have been straight back up those stairs if I'd seen a rat.
Yeah, you can have someone stroking your hair, but if a rat runs up...
that is just the way it goes. Rats and spiders, anything that can move quicker than me, and no, it's game over, I'm afraid. So platform 1, and I think I spoke to my colleague Anita, who was also at the event earlier on. We were just discussing the kind of things we had, just to refresh our memories. And she had, whilst she was down there with her group, apparently they'd made communication with a soldier, and they all heard like somebody whistling a tune.
Okay.
So I'm not really quite sure where that would have come from, because none of the other groups were anywhere near them. So unless somebody was down in the tunnels whistling, I don't know where that came from.
I mean, I suppose it could have been someone working on one of the adjacent, because it is a branch. It sort of was a sort of branch off the Holborn, which is obviously still a very busy station. I guess it could have been some kind of noise coming from that, but to get a soldier and then to get the whistling kind of would be, let's be honest, it's quite sort of, soldiers did seem to whistle. Well, you see, that's what you see whenever you watch any of the history sort of programs.
I mean, I think Anita did say that the whistling sounded as though it came from, it wasn't like it wasn't far away sort of thing. But we never heard any, whilst we were down on the platforms, we never heard anything. There was not a noise coming from anywhere else. So, because I was expecting to maybe hear, the occasional tube on another
rumble
line or something. You know what sound travels. But honestly, when you were down on those 2 platforms, it was deadly quiet.
See, I'd find that I'd be surprised with that, because knowing how much the lines do almost intercross each other, or run next to each other, or run over each other, or and when you're on one of the other tube stations, you can hear a tube coming into one of the other platforms quite a long way away. That's quite amazing that it was.
The only thing that we did have was every now and again there would be a massive gust of wind come down the tunnel, like there was a train coming. But no, heard no noise. No noise pollution from the tunnels, really.
That would be interesting to look at the maps then, to see where that gust could have come from, because normally you get that gust just before a train. It was odd, and it happened quite a few times, and I just put it down to the fact that it's because it's a tunnel. I didn't really put that down as it could potentially be paranormal, but it might have been. But no, so I'd probably want to have a look at the maps of the tunnels to see if there's any that sort of could push enough of a draft down that it would use that as its escape route.
Yeah.
I mean, it is logical. It could have come from one of the others, and I say that is a branch off Holborn, but it was interesting. Yeah. That could have been something.
Who knows?
Could have been.
Who knows? And I just shrugged it off.
Well, I think you have to with some stuff. You can't assume everything is.
Yeah, you've got to rationalise some things, I think.
Yeah.
But no, platform 1 was interesting, considering we had to have all the lights on, and we even spent time on the train carriage that was on there. That was quite interesting. Whilst we were on there, we all felt that there was like a male energy who wasn't particularly very pleased with the fact that we were on that train carriage. We didn't really have anything happen on there. We heard kind of a few, weird noises, but again, we couldn't kind of pinpoint as to where it was coming from. We had a couple of our motion sensor lights go off whilst in the carriage as well. Platform 1 was interesting, and it does just go to show that you don't have to investigate in the dark, because we did have things happen even with the lights on. I don't think you have to investigate
at night either, to be quite honest. I think if you go and it's quiet during the day,
that's the thing. I mean, and that's
then as well.
That's what a lot of our guests then who come along, they're always like, so do ghosts only come out at night time? And I'm like, no. You're actually more likely to have a paranormal experience during the day than you are at night. But unfortunately, with the locations that we choose to investigate, we have to do it at night time, because during the day they're open to the public and lots of noise and things. But when you've got somewhere like Aldwych, it's perfect.
So platform 2.
Yeah, platform 2. That was that was a bit of a game changer. We could have the lights turned off on platform 2, and you couldn't even see your hand in front of your face. So I think as well, when you're in the dark, well, at least I find that you're more sensitive, aren't you? Because you are aware of the fact that you can't see anything.
Yeah, one of your senses is switched off, so the other ones tend to heighten. Yeah,
exactly. And that definitely happened in there. We had one of our guests got quite upset, and I must add that it was a man. And I always like it when men get upset on our events, because the majority.
Sorry.
And do you know what? It's normally the skeptics that they turn up at the beginning of the night and they're like, oh, we don't believe I'm only here because my wife's dragged me. And then 2 hours later, they're quivering in the corner in tears. And I love that, because I know it's we've done good. We've worked hard.
Is that when you shove the spirits an extra tenner for what they've done?
Yeah, just slip them a £5 on the way out. So we actually had one of our gentleman guests got quite upset, and you asked me earlier on about whether we used mediums or whether we had any people there who were sensitive. This particular bloke did claim to be sensitive to spirit, and he said that he was picking up on a gentleman called Peter, who apparently was lost his life and was killed there, and picked up on that he'd been stabbed. Now, I did look into this to see whether I could find any, records of that sort of thing happening, and I must admit that I couldn't. Doesn't mean to say that it didn't, happen, but that's what he picked up on in there. And I think, the guests who were there with me would agree that it did feel quite menacing.
Because it might even have not been a stabbing on the actual the platform. It could have been a stabbing on the road above, and
quite possibly.
It doesn't. But the platform felt different, you say?
It really did. It felt platform 1 felt, apart from the train carriage, felt quite. It didn't feel scary then. It felt quite, dare I say, nice.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah. No, I know what you mean.
Yeah, platform 2 felt menacing. It was very dark. It was dingy. People felt uncomfortable. People were being touched. We had a lot of motion sensor lights going off in that area. and I'm pretty sure that, yes, it was platform 2. We heard, we were kind of up the one end, and right from the bottom end we heard this like clunking of metal, like a metal pole had been dropped.
Right.
So a couple of us got up and we ran down there to see, you know, whether we could see anybody, because I know that some people have been successful with, you know, trespassing at Aldwych. They go through the tunnels, don't they? And I thought, oh gosh, we've got somebody coming in here now, but there was absolutely nobody there, and there was no sign of anything that had fallen. But then it could have been something falling from the roof. It was one of those things that we couldn't get to the bottom of what it was.
You couldn't rule it out, but you couldn't rule out that it wasn't paranormal, but you couldn't rule out that it was. Sort of thing.
Yeah. So we did actually, 2 of our guests then volunteered to stay at the end of that tunnel to see whether they could hear anything else. But I think they lasted about 10 minutes until they came back up.
Well, interestingly, there were back sort of, I think it was pre-1970s, there used to be these people called fluffers who used to work in the underground tunnels cleaning them, basically, from the sort of, I suppose, the detritus that was left by humans, shall we say, and quite a lot of those have reported seeing and hearing things in the tunnels, like sort of clunking noises and feeling like they need to run away. So it actually could have been one of those old cleaners sort of clunking around and cleaning, but that would have, if you couldn't find anything that had fallen and hit one of the rails or something that would have produced that kind of noise, even something small, because obviously the noise would have been amplified. Yeah, that's quite.
But it's interesting you should say about people having the feeling that they wanted to run, they wanted to get away, because that's exactly what the 2 chaps at the end of the tunnel said, that they all of a sudden they just felt like, we shouldn't be standing here anymore, and they wanted just to get away and come back up to the rest of us.
Right.
So, and again, that was coming from 2 men, so I was secretly rubbing my hands together.
I find that men get more scared than women in general. I mean, my husband's going to come on his first ever investigation with me in November. We're going to Doncaster Air Museum. Now, I have a love of aeroplanes. I have a love of like military stuff, and so does he. To be fair, he is nervous, I think, is the polite way of putting it. He's already told me he will be sprinting up the runway if something touches him. The group who we're going with, I am trying to work out if we can rig something up to scare him. But he's not a skeptic. He isn't. He actually, he's heard some of the experiences I've had, and he knows I wouldn't. I will look into why they're happening before I accept that it's happened. But he is already saying come November he won't be sleeping very well. Because and I keep trying to tell him, look, it's not like your Most Haunted or your Ghost Adventures. You're not going to get a full-bodied apparition. It'd be nice, but it's rare. But
wouldn't that be hilarious if you say that now and then you go to Doncaster and you do?
Well, I'll be chuffed to pieces, I tell you. He'll be coming on all of them with me if he can conjure stuff like that up. But hey,
some people wait a whole lifetime for something like that, don't they?
Exactly. I want something small. I want someone to communicate with me using my torch. That's one of my sort of goals. But he's sort of he's nervous, but he believes in it.
Okay.
The last one I went on, there was a few men there who admitted they were skeptics. That's not a problem. I have no problem with you being a skeptic. Keep your mind open. I'm a skeptical believer, I suppose you could call it. I believe it, but I just don't believe, every photo I see when someone says, oh, look, that's an orb, or that's this, I'll be looking and going, no, that's pareidolia, or no, you had hair across your lens when you took that. I'm not going to believe every single thing, but I believe it's possible. So, I'm with you. I do like seeing, because you don't seem to get many women who come on these things that are skeptics.
No,
in my experience, it's the men.
Absolutely, it is always the men. It really is always the men. But I do agree with you that it does normally tend to be the men who end up running away screaming, or stood in the corner crying because something's just touched their hand.
Yes. No, that's why I was laughing when you were saying that, because I've seen that happen more than once, and you know, even when I was communicating with the spirit, this young bloke was like, "You're right, you're right." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine." He goes, "You're freezing cold." And I went, "I'm fine, don't worry, I've done this before." Yeah. Yeah, but then after that, they're like, "We're coming again, we're doing this one, we're doing this one." And you're just, okay, you believe now, do you?
Yes.
Well, it does sound like there's definitely something going on in Aldwych. I think there's probably something going on in a lot of these tube stations, the ones that are still in use and the ones that are
Definitely
deserted. I mean, you know, when you think of the amount of lives that have gone through them,
yeah.
and you know, the ones that were around, well, not just during the Second World War, some of them were used as air raid shelters in the First World War.
Yeah.
They're all incredibly fascinating places. So
They really are.
thank you ever so much for coming on, Danni. I really appreciate it. It has been a genuine pleasure talking to you.
Oh, it's been great. Thank you very much.
You want to come back again? You'll come back
on.
again then?
Yes.
Cool. Cool. I
Where
like
do
it when
I
people
sign?
say that. We'll talk when
No,
we go
it's
off
been
air.
great.
Don't go anywhere. What have you got coming up that you'd like to tell people about? Quickly, we've got 2 minutes.
Okay, so tomorrow night.
Not actually tomorrow night because we're.
Oh no, it's not, isn't it? Yes, sorry.
You're going to be
that's my
doing.
fault.
You've just.
We are
started...
going to. Yeah, we're going to Shepton Mallet. In Shepton Mallet. Shepton Mallet. I can't even get my words out now. Shepton Mallet Prison.
Yep.
Down in Somerset. So yeah, we're spending the night there. Oh gosh.
What have you got coming up in October?
October, we have got Blackfriars Priory in Gloucester. That's our Halloween event this year.
Oh, nice.
We're also going to De Grey Street in Hull.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, and Shaw House in Berkshire.
Yeah, I know.
So
Shaw House,
we've never been there before, so that'll be our first time there. But it looks
Nice.
amazing. So
if anyone wants to find out about any of these, all they have to do is look on your Facebook page.
yes,
Ghost Goings On, like the page. Jobs are good.
yeah, perfect. Yes.
Well, it really has been an absolute pleasure, Danni. Thank you ever so much for coming on the show. If anyone does want to go and have a look at Ghostly Goings On, just go on Facebook. They're lovely to talk to. They're very, very friendly. Danni or Anita or one of the other admin will reply straight back to you. Don't forget, Parasearch Radio has shows on every night of the week. You can even go and listen to old shows if you've missed one and you want to listen to it again. It's not a problem. But that's all that leaves me to say. I'll get my words out. Is have a good evening, sleep tight, and don't worry too much about things that go bump in the night.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.